now that we have the Subaru sorted and where I want it, I brought it up to Vermont. I think, you know, like a lot of other people when I was younger, I heard a lot about Subaru and rally driving in Vermont. So I thought it'd be a fun place to bring it up and kind of test it out. I'm really excited to have it up here. It's beautiful. I've always loved coming to the state. I haven't been to the area that we're heading. We're going to catch Route 7 in Bennington, Vermont, so we're on the way there now. Vermont has an interesting history. There have been indigenous people here for around 12,000 years. Most recently, when the European settlers came, there were the Abenaki and Mohawk tribes that were actually warring over the area. France came and settled colonies in the area that's now Canada, and Great Britain settled colonies basically on the Atlantic seacoast. So they actually enlisted the help in the 1700s of those tribes to fight each other, leading to raids and, you know, all sorts of different kind of messy, horrible things. But eventually, after the 7-Year War, France seceded everything east of the Mississippi River, and Great Britain got what is now Vermont. The New York state and New Hampshire state were fighting over it, kind of going back and forth saying, this land's mine, this land's mine. But eventually, some settlers from around Portsmouth, New Hampshire, started settling the land and established the Republic of Vermont. So, interesting history. We're going to head towards Bennington now. I've got some information there, and we'll hop on Route 7 and have a really nice drive. So here we are in Bennington, Vermont. This is actually the oldest town in Vermont. It was granted to a group of Portsmouth, New Hampshire men from Britain back in the early 1700s. Granted, they didn't technically own the land then, but that's when this town was established. There are some forts in Vermont that were established earlier than that, but this is the earliest actually established town. Bennington is most known for a battle that happened here where General John Stark came with a group of 1,500 men from New Hampshire and defeated a Confederate force of 800 men. The 308-foot tall statue behind me commemorates that. That's what we're here to see. We're gonna go hop on Route 7 and head north. So we are on Route 7A, an old subsection of Route 7. And it's been fantastic. It's awesome. Route 7 is a highway that was built back in 1929. They started on it, and it was built. It goes all the way from southern Connecticut near 95, all the way up through Connecticut, Massachusetts, Vermont, and then it ends right before the Canadian border. So it's a really cool way for you to be able to go and see a bunch of states, a bunch of gorgeous stuff. You know, I started, like you saw, I started in Bennington and then hopped on. I'm going to take it all the way north to Burlington. So I'm excited. I got a few stops along the way. I'm going to be kind of hunting some fun back roads too. I've scoped out a few spots online, but should be a lot of fun to drive. I would recommend people so far checking it out, and I've only been on it for a few miles. Talking through some of the initial stuff I did when I picked up this car, there was a handful of things I had to do that were driving me insane. The rear taillight was cracked, the front hood scoop was all messed up, and it needed, you know, tires in alignment. That's the tires I ended up using anyway. The tires were chopped, they were dangerous. It felt okay, but you could feel some weird vibrations at different speeds. So tires in alignment, the cracked taillight prevent me from getting pulled over, and the hood scoop, you know, being painted. It's the one thing you can see out the front windshield, so I had that done. Dropped it off at a local body shop. Took a while to get back, but overall, I'm really glad I did it. I'll have to show you a picture of when I first bought the car. I also polished the headlights. When I picked this car up, it definitely looked nothing like it does today. So I'm happy that that initial stuff worked out. It definitely helps me stay sane in this car. So yeah, that was the initial stuff. Like I mentioned, I bought some cheap. They're under Mark IVs, and that was just to get the car on the road and safe when I bought it. But they actually ended up having decent performance. I have to say they are relatively sticky. If you look them up for the price point, they have pretty high reviews, mostly like 4.5 to 5 stars across the board. So for an inexpensive purchase, I'm happy with it. If I was really trying to get some performance out of this car, I might do some Michelin Pilot Super Sports or something like that. But for tires, I'm really happy. Wheels, I like OEM Plus, and I love BBS. As you see in some of my shots, I have LMs, which are my dream wheels. I put them up on my cars. It took me forever to find a set. So when I found a set of OEM BBS STI wheels in gold that were freshly refinished, I mean just refinished, I had to pick them up, and I'm really, really happy with them. The only downside is the 0405 STIs were 5x100 like this, but when they facelifted this car, they switched the bolt pattern on the STIs to 5x1 14.3, so I had to get adapters. And the problem with getting adapters is I didn't want an aggressive setup on a daily car. I've had them. I don't want to run a ton of camber. I don't want to run stretch. Not trying to deal with all of that. So what I ended up doing was measuring the shank length, and it's about 23 millimeters on this car, and I bought 25 millimeter adapters, and they were FabTech. They were great. I actually really liked, or FabSpeed, one of the two. Really liked the fit and finish on them. They were really nice. They bolted on perfectly, no problems. The centering ring was perfect that came with them. For the wheels, and there were zero vibrations, zero problems. So I really, really like the wheel and tire setup, and I get a lot of compliments. Even though this isn't an STI, you know, people love the wheels. The black on gold gets a lot of comments, so, and I can't complain. I mean, those STI wheels, I know people with STIs did aftermarket wheels, but those are forged BBSs. It's a big deal. You know, they weren't poured into aluminum poured into a mold like a cast wheel. They actually take a solid block of aluminum and machine out the BBS wheel, and that's fantastic. It makes them really light and really strong. There's zero chance for a bubble in the material, so they are light. It feels great. The car really does feel planted, and I definitely love the wheel and tire and adapter setup on this. brake setup, I'm really happy with the results. I do have to say, it's one of the hardest brake jobs I've ever done, and I know people are going to laugh at that, but I had never heard of internal brake shoes. I looked up doing brakes on these cars online, never heard anything about it. I don't know why. I guess it's an assumed thing. Maybe all Subarus have that. So that was a huge struggle. It took up a ton of time. The fronts weren't bad. Those pins, like I said in the video, they get rusty, so like it's a neat rally car idea, and in practice when it was new, it was probably functioned pretty well, but it definitely had some time there too, having to lube these pins up and find a way to kind of hammer them out of the caliper. And with those rear internal brake discs, even if you know exactly what you're doing, as they rotate over the years, they wear in ridges in the internal brake shoe. So even if you're good at it, it's going to be a real pain to get those off. You're going to need an air chisel. Lift would have made it so much easier. So that was all really time consuming. But that being said, I'm really, really happy with the results. When I initially got this car, the brake pedal worked. It worked fine. There wasn't like too much travel or too little travel, anything like that I was worried about brake lines. But the pedal feel was kind of crunchy. Felt like a bag of cereal is the only thing I can think to compare it to. So once I was done, the smoothness of the brakes, and I didn't go top end brakes. I also didn't go with the cheapest. I got essentially factory spec brakes, and I'm really impressed. They're not throwing a ton of dust, a little bit of dust. They don't squeak. They're really, really good. And I guess just the stopping power, I haven't had to do too many emergency stops, but I mean 55 to 0, like it's pretty good. It feels pretty good. I'm really, really happy with it. So yeah, brake setup is perfectly balanced for what I'm looking for in a daily car. So having the wheels fitted up, naturally the next thing for me to do was suspension and get another alignment. The coilovers I bought, $1,000, close to $1,000 for a set of coilovers that have no adjustability. There wasn't adjustable dampening, there wasn't adjustable camber, none of that you do get in other sets for less money. I was a little hesitant at first, but I have to say, and I've said it multiple times, the STs on this car are awesome. I absolutely love them. They handle bumps really well. They were fantastic. The install wasn't bad at all. I actually loaded this car up with my wife, my dog, the dog's crate, cooler full of beer and ice, and all of our stuff to stay for a weekend, and drove on nasty back roads in New Hampshire, and it had zero problems. I didn't rub, I didn't bump, I didn't scrape, not a single problem. So that was really awesome. I'm super, super impressed. These STs are, well, ST is owned by KW. So I've been told multiple times by a couple of different people that the STs that are on this car are essentially KW V1s, V2s with a slightly different shock body. It's made out of a different material. Other than that, you're getting a really high quality product for the price, and it shows. I've had Racelands on a couple of different cars. I've had air suspension. This is the highest I've ever gone in spending for a coilover, and I'm really impressed. They're really, really, really worth the money. As far as the alignment goes, like I said in the video, it's not worth me trying to do it myself. I'm not going to do a great job. You can buy tools and do it manually, but for like the $80 or whatever it costs for a shop to do it, you know, it's not a big deal. So I'd rather do that and just get it done and know it was done correctly with exact measurements. When I got it back, I did have to roll the fenders. It was camber from the install, the way I installed some of the bolts in the rear. It had rear camber. So I'm really happy with the way the fender rolling came out too. You know, I took my time, I used heat. There's really no sign that I had to roll the fenders. So happy how that came out, really happy with how it rode and how the alignment came out, and no complaints. As you've seen and as we're gonna see driving, it sticks to the road and it's low enough to be fun. If I could, I would bring down the front a little bit more. Driving over humped roads, I get a little bit sketched out. In other cars, they're lower than this, a lot lower than this, but I've lost oil pans, and I just don't feel like dealing with that in the daily, so I'll probably keep it right where it is. So doing the exhaust, the job wasn't too bad. I was hoping to get everything out in one piece, but I did have to cut the pipe. I'm really happy with this exhaust and the way it turned out. You know, I love the way Subaru Boxer 4s sound. They sound really good. Even starting out as a Volkswagen guy, I had to appreciate the sound of the Boxer motor. I would look up anytime one drove by. So an exhaust was a must. I got the HKSTI exhaust. It was secondhand. It was pretty beat up, but it's under the car. I'm not, you know, everything goes together. It doesn't leak. It's in pretty good shape. It leaked a little at one joint that I had to fix with a little bit of extra like copper sealer, and that was no big deal. You know, so I'm really happy. It's not, the exhaust note isn't obnoxious. Loud Subarus do sound good, but I mean, this is my daily. I don't want to alert the cops every time I'm driving by, but it's enough that if somebody knows what it is, they look up. So I really like it. You know, I'm really, really happy with the way it turned out. The big muffler style really isn't for me, but keep in mind this was designed in the like early to mid 2000s. It's a facelift of a 04, car, so it kind of fits, kind of suits for the time, so I don't really mind it. But yeah, let's see if we can get some exhaust noise going here now. Really happy with the way it came out. It's quiet, but on it, it's a little bit loud. Yeah, so not too bad. You're hearing a lot of the induction noise as well because of the intake. But just out the back, you know, makes some good noise. I'll throw up a video, a little clip of that. But yeah, really impressed. And when we're talking about that, we can talk about the intake. The K&N intake I bought, again, second hand, but in really good shape. The guy just went with a Cobb intake, different intake for a tune when he was upgrading his turbo. So I really like that. It makes good induction noises, especially under load. You make fun, you know, little intake blow-offy noises. Especially if you're going uphill. It's fun, it's loud, it's as loud as the exhaust. So, you know, I try not to be obnoxious. It's the stock diverter valve. Those are mechanical and can hold up to 20 pounds of boost, so I'm never going to need to upgrade that. But it still gives it a little, you know, a little sneeze, a little achoo. So I really enjoyed, you know, the intake. See if we can get it to make some noise. Yeah, so that one was a little more subtle. It's easier uphill. I'm going to load a little, get it to do it. So I'm happy with it. In the cabin, it makes nice noise. Outside, it's a little bit loud. I'll get a video of that and throw it in there too. So overall, exhaust intake, the jobs weren't bad. Exhaust took some time, and I had to fix that little leak because I didn't use the right copper sealant when I was putting on the exhaust gasket. But overall, like I said, so far well balanced. We've covered suspension, brakes, wheels, tires, mild exhaust, mild intake. I'm really happy with it. So overall, it's been great. Let's keep driving, find some fun roads. Really impressed with how this car sticks to the road. Really, really impressed. It feels great. Between the tires, the wheels, the coilovers, it just feels well balanced. Alright, so I'm here on Mount Tabor Road. It's unbelievable. I can't get drone shots in here because it's a state park, but the road is just stunning. It's got tight corners, it's insanely fun, it's beautiful. It's also a little dangerous. I'm trying to get some running shots, but it's just so dangerous to pull over. There's also a massive bump, and still seriously so impressed at how the STs are handling all this. You know, that was what I just hit was gnarly and fine, no rubbing, no problems, but just the turns are awesome. I love the elevation change. I mean, it's steep and it's tight. You definitely have to be careful. I would love to be pushing the car here, but I don't want to get killed. I don't want to hurt somebody. So I saw that this road was supposed to be fun, and it definitely delivered. Even just a casual cruise is really nice. The scenes are unbelievable. You're coming down Mount Tabor, and you are just getting the entire valley in between this mountain and the next mountain, and it is unreal. So gorgeous. So just driving, I gotta take a couple of spots. Gonna get kind of gnarly, but unreal. Love it, love it, love it, love it. And the Subaru's doing great. It's holding up well. It did smoke a bit on the passenger side. I was pushing it uphill, trying to get those shots, and I saw some good smoke coming out from the turbo side. I still have good oil pressure. I still have plenty of oil. It was definitely oil. I think there's a valve cover gasket leak up there that might have gotten onto the exhaust. I'm not exactly sure at the moment, but it seems to be happy and fine now. No more smoke. So I just have to be careful about pushing it too hard. And that's what happens. That's what happens when you modify things, when you push them when they're old. So we'll get that back and eventually sort it out back home. up and up, and it was just getting tighter and tighter. And maybe it does get nicer up there somewhere, but the road was getting really rough and really tight, so I figured I would turn it back around, come back down, and I'm running out of daylight anyway. I'm supposed to make it to Burlington. I'm not even halfway there, so gotta get boogieing. The air pump delete was definitely the hardest job on this car, and that's why I didn't finish it correctly. It had been done once before. It hadn't been done by Subaru. It wasn't done well. The bolts that hold, you can actually, so you do the air pump delete, right? You take out the main air pump and the two valves, but one of the bolts holding the valve in, you can sneak a socket extension onto it and get it out, but the bolt, first of all, didn't have the right head on it. The second of all, was corroded. It was whatever they used, it was a crap bolt with some like T25 hex head or whatever. So I couldn't get it out. So what I ended up doing was pulling the pump, leaving the valves in. One valve's not connected to anything. It has the block-off plate on the far side of it, but you need it for the barometric pressure sensor. And then the other valve is in there, but what I did was I actually took one of the hoses that was on it and put a bolt in it and blocked it off, sealed it up. It's not plugged in anyway. It's never going to try and draw any, open or close or draw any air. And just Subaru's designed for that. I get emissions are great. There are things that we need, but Subaru's design for those particular things was horrible. There's a hood scoop right there, and if you wash your car or if it rains hard while you're driving, water gets down in there, and those pumps sit right off the side of the intercooler. So right on the side of the intercooler, when I took both the pumps, the pump and the two valves and all the hoses out, they all had water. Every single one had tons of water in them. So it was awful. So I knew the car needed them when I picked it up. I knew I'd be getting into a tune and having to delete them because it wasn't worth, if you quote it out, it's a lot of money, a lot of parts, and a lot of time to actually replace everything. So the block off worked fine. The plates were great. They fit. Everything I had fit. Super easy to do on one. And like I said, on the other, I couldn't sneak it out. I'm not taking off the intake manifold and all of the accessories in order to get to that. It was easier just to leave that valve that nobody's ever going to see because it sits under the intercooler in there and just block off one of the hoses. So that was that. And then I had to get it tuned. And the tune, I'm happy with. The secondary air ride out stuff, like I said, because I needed to do that and I knew I needed to do that, I knew I was going to be getting a tune, so I had it written out. The only thing I'll say about that is that it idles really high at start now. I'm sure it's part of the tune. It's not a big deal. It just idles at like 2,500 for a few seconds, which is a little weird the first couple of times getting used to it. And then they did like a stage 1 base map for an intake and a catback. You know, it's super basic stuff. It obviously wasn't like dyno tuned or looked into. I wanted pretty much the most basic tune they could give me in keeping all reliability. I didn't, a little bit of fun is great. I'm not building this car to be super fast or anything, just wake it up a little. And what I noticed that it did was when the car was stock, even with the intake, you felt like you were waiting forever for boost to come on for a small turbo, which is kind of surprising. What the tune did was it really evened that out. That torque kind of dip is now pretty much a nice curve. I will say, I didn't feel like it had a lot of power up top anyway, but it definitely doesn't feel like after 3,500, 4,000 RPMs that you're really doing too much there. But it is good all around. It wasn't overly expensive. It's a Cobb tune, the block off's done, and now there's no check engine light on my cruise control back, so that's fantastic. And why does Subaru do that? Why does Subaru feel the need to, if your check engine light's on, you've lost cruise control? There's a lot of reason to have check engine light. I don't think losing cruise control makes any sense, but whatever. So overall, happy with that. I was a little surprised at the high idle, and I'm glad that the dip in torque is gone. projects I did. Turned out nice. I think they really tied the car in. What I did was I had to fix the rear window trim was coming out of the actual door, so I had to adhesive that down, and I think it came out pretty well. I mean, you really can't tell that it was ever off, and it had fallen pretty far. It was pretty much completely in the car. So I had to fix that because it was super obnoxious. Water could get in, all that. The STI fog covers, I really like those. I mean, I bought them on eBay. I thought maybe they'd be a little bit nicer even though it was eBay. But what I ended up doing was actually pulling my factory fog covers off. And because the STI emblem wasn't actually applied, I just applied them to my factory fog light covers. So that way they match, everything matches and looks good. You don't have to, you don't have like unmatching where part of your bumper's in super good shape and part of your bumper's in awful shape. So I'm pretty happy with that. And then the final thing I did was fix those front fenders where the bumper meets the fender. And the guy for me had lowering springs. There's some scratches on the bottom of the bumper. So I think what happened was eventually after going over speed bumps, his apartment complex actually had speed bumps. He probably brushed it enough that those tabs there wear out. And they're kind of a pain in the butt to find. I didn't feel like dealing with it. So what I did was, as I showed you guys, I drilled a small hole and just zip tied it closed. And I know, not elegant, definitely not the right solution, but it works. 5 feet or 5 miles an hour. I just can't stand getting out of my car and looking back and having, every time the bumper pops out, the bumper pops out, the bumper pops out. It drives me bananas. So, pretty psyched about how all that came out. I think it really helps tie it in. So as far as the interior goes, I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. Let's start with the good here. So the short shifter that I bought, it was inexpensive and it's fantastic. I really like the shifts on it. It's crisp. It's just reducing the throw. It's nothing crazy. It's not a super fancy kit, but it did a really great job, and the installation was super straightforward. I couldn't believe it. I typically like stock interiors, like even on any of my other cars. If I want like iPod integration, I would never put in an aftermarket radio like this. I tend to use like a wiring kit through the back. So this radio is hard for me to deal with, but wasn't my install there. I do plan on replacing it at some point, but short shifter was good. The floor mats I did, they are Subaru, they do fit, and they did eventually break in. I was kind of concerned about it when I bought them, that, you know, they're really stiff. It was hard to use the pedals at first. It was a little sketchy, but after a couple of days of use, and we got a couple of warm days, especially while I was driving it, they broke right in. The passenger side still needs a little break-in. My dog spends as much time over there as anyone else, and she obviously doesn't need it. And then there's the bad. It's this shift knob. It is the worst single piece of automotive product I have ever had. I've never had a Delrin shift knob. The factory shift knob, if I hadn't broken it, putting the short shifter in, I would have put it back on. This is horrendous. So that's going away, you know, soon, ASAP. So yeah, really not impressed with that, but overall, I like the interior as it sits. I want to replace the radio. I'm going to go after that shift knob. The short shifter installation, you know, the only thing I didn't show you guys is I did almost knock myself out. I had to get it out of the knuckle inside the transmission. I literally had to stand with both feet across and pull as hard as I could. I ended up smashing my head off the dome light, so that kind of sucks. So be careful doing that. And in reverse, you know, it's definitely a challenge to get in there, but I got it done. So yeah, a couple of things to fix, but overall I'm pretty happy with it. You should see the view. Even we've opened this up now. It's a 4-lane highway, 2 on each side, and the view just coming down. I have the other camera running. The view coming down into just the 4-lane highway is unreal. Gorgeous. Can't believe it. Definitely, if you can, come check this area out. It's beautiful all around. So I'm almost to Rutland at this point, which is the halfway mark. Cars running strong, so I think we're good. It's actually the most city-ish though. If you're looking, you know, hopefully I can get some decent shots of this, but it's like strip malls, which is so bizarre because 10 miles south of here, it was pure country and farms, and it just opens up into what looks like, I don't know, a strip of like Delaware or some of those other states where I've been to where it's just like Route 1 runs all the way through, you know, like north of Boston, and there's just strip malls everywhere. So it's kind of interesting. The backdrop is still amazing, mountains all around, but a lot of stuff going on in here. But let's go into downtown Rutland and see some of the old historic buildings. It's supposed to have some of the nicest downtown historic buildings around, so check it out. Yeah, I'm really not disappointed with downtown Rutland. It's gorgeous. I mean, it looks like they've repurposed some stuff into like modern, you know, obviously modern stores here on the left, but on the right, the architecture is awesome. It's gorgeous. So Rutland was an old actual mill town back in the 1700s, and what happened was they discovered marble quarries here, like really, really good marble quarries. So once trains actually made it up this far north into Vermont, this town exploded. There were a bunch of firms that came here and settled in, and that's where you get a lot of these really big, old, grand buildings. They're unreal. Pulled off onto just a back road to reset the cameras, and it is just so beautiful. So many great roads around here. You know, just can't believe it. Gorgeous. Really nice turns, really good, just like again, there's a lot of really good elevation change and a lot of really nice, just open, quiet roads. Love it up this way. So we're starting to get close to Lake Champlain. If we're going to Burlington, we have to talk about Lake Champlain. That's why it exists. Lake Champlain is 104 miles long, 14 miles wide, and 400 feet deep. It's been a natural border for thousands of years. It was a border for the indigenous tribes. And as far as the Native Americans go, the Mohawks and the Abenaki, like I mentioned earlier, fought over this area. It was a border between them. For a while, France wanted it. It's been part of the Revolutionary War, the War of 1812. There's just a bunch of history there, so too much to go into, but essentially Burlington was able to be built because of it, and we will talk to that once I get up to Burlington. You know, anything from that era that happened to be on a lake that size can definitely provide a lot for a town on the time. So it's gorgeous. I hope you get some good shots of it, and yeah, we'll talk about it when we get closer to Burlington. Champlain Valley, so Lake Champlain has a valley around it that has been turned into farmlands, and it's absolutely beautiful. So you do have mountains, like you typically have these ridges of mountains, but then it completely flattens out, and I hope you guys can see it. It's amazing. It's just the land gets really, really flat. There's just a bunch of aerated farmland and just beautiful woods. It's gorgeous. We're after peeping season, which is good because there's no traffic, but it's unbelievable up here. Definitely worth I can see the nearest mountain set is way that way. So this is just flat. Lake Champlain's over there, and on the other side of it would be New York State. And it's just stunning from here. So we're about 20 miles south of Burlington now, and it just keeps getting prettier. The valley that I'm in is just completely widened out. We're just kind of like working up and down these really beautiful hills. It makes for a great drive. There's a lot to see. I mean, if you were interested, you could stop. There are wineries. I just passed where woodchuck cider is made, which is pretty cool. Definitely worth a visit up here, and definitely worth the drive. So we're coming up on South Burlington right now, and I just wanted to talk to the history of Burlington a little bit. The same grants that were given to the men in Portsmouth, New Hampshire that settled Bennington also gave the men in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, the town that is now Burlington. It was established in 1785. There was some weird politics. I mean, it was involved in a lot of the stuff that was happening up here between France and Great Britain, and there was a lot of trade up here, so that was mostly uncomfortable for the people that lived in and around this area. But eventually, as we talked about, France had to give up everything east of the Mississippi, so Burlington became a pretty busy logging city as well as like a port of entry. It's right here on Lake Champlain. It borders New York, and it was wildly popular once the railroads got up here. Just like with the quarries down that we talked about, Rutland. Same thing. When the railroads made it this far north, people could come in and get to the rest of the United States from Burlington. So it was really big for immigration. And it was also big for getting that lumber out. So there's a lot of places that could do lumber in Vermont, but they didn't have the ability to get it out or ship it out on barges. So it could go both directions. So it became a really big, booming port city. So that being said, it's the biggest city in Vermont. It is not the capital, that's Montpelier, but it is the most populated city in Vermont, and I think it's absolutely beautiful. I can't wait to get in there. Burlington welcome sign right there, and Route 7, which I'm on splits, you can take it kind of out of the city and up towards Canada, or you can take essentially the same highway into downtown. So we're heading into downtown right now. That's us, guys. We did it. I could not be more excited about this. The car held together even after I thought I broke it. I'll go into more about that later, but this is awesome. It was a great car. It cruised along without any problems besides me beating on it, and I'm really, really stoked. Everything came together for a daily. It's definitely proved itself. So it's humming along great, and yeah, we're gonna wrap this up. So that pretty much finishes up the daily build that I've done here. I got it to Burlington. As you guys saw, Lake Champlain is beautiful. The city is gorgeous. I'm really glad I got it up here. I'm impressed that it made it. Even if we had a little hiccup along the way, I'll check that out when we get home. It was a lot of fun. Doing everything was fun. I went through all the changes I did to the car, and the drive up here was just amazing. If I could change anything I had done, I would probably do wider adapters a little bit in the rear since I had to roll the fenders anyway. Definitely gonna do that shift knob. I hate it, I can't stand it. And the radio, none of the buttons work. So I can manage to force an iPod to play, but that's it. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I want to thank anybody for watching this. If you haven't checked out the earlier videos in my series, please do. Please go back and watch me work on this thing and take it from pretty haggard to a little bit more haggard. I know some of these videos are rough around the edges, but I'm learning with the video editing and the video recording as I go, just like with the car. I'm not a mechanic by trade. I just love engineering. I could talk about boats, bikes, cars, anything all day long. I absolutely love it. So upcoming on the next series, I'm gonna actually do my project car. This was a daily. I picked up a project car last year that got neglected because I was working on this. So we're gonna get back to that and get it going. It's having some trouble running right now, and I really want to get it sorted and get it on a really fun road. Also, I'm going to do a separate series called Debate Racer, where my friends and I are going to talk through some car aspects and then race them, sim race. So no big budget stuff here, but definitely a lot of fun. Thank you all for checking this out. I really appreciate it.